Everyone, welcome back. Hopefully those of you who were affected got through the storm this past weekend. We did, no problem. Actually got a lot of work done. The engine's installed, but we're going to give you an update on that on the next video, maybe tomorrow. But today I'm being told I'm preempted by Carol. So some of you have sent some messages to Carol, hey, can you help us? We'd like to do our own interior as well. So in these next little video, Carol is going to show you exactly how she's made one of the cushions. This is actually the rear seat back in the RV10. She's got a step-by-step video put together for you, and you'll be able to transfer that to all the other cushions, she tells me. And even for some of the two-place RVs, everything will be the same. This one really came out nice. You can see she used her diamonds. It's got the seat heater plug in it, and it's all ready to go. So the only request I have is no more requests for Carol. We got to get ours done. Thanks. Hope you enjoy it.
As you can see, I have an uncovered cushion on the right and a previously covered cushion on the left. The one on the left is an original Oregon Aero back seat for our RV10. They did a beautiful job sewing it, so that's what I'm using to emulate to try and make one comparable. As you can see, it has a zipper in the bottom all the way around, and they did horizontal lines for the panel. I'm going to do something different, but this is the basic shape, and I'm going to try and get these sections, this section, and this section comparable, and then just do something different in this section. The challenge with the Oregon Aero seat cushion and what makes it so comfy is that it is not a box cushion, it is contoured. And it has little wings that stick up. I'm calling them wings. And so the first step when we're doing a cushion is to make the patterns for the pieces. So the first piece is going to be the top, and that is in 3 pieces. And you can see I've taken the center section, I've taken my durascrim. Now I have trimmed it already, and I've pinned it to the cushion. The center section up here is 8 inches. These are roughly 3.5 inches. I have made sure they are equal on each side. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a blank piece of durascrim and put one on each side, and then we'll trace this line, and that's going to be our seam line for the front piece. Okay, I've overlapped my 2 side pieces of durascrim with at the edge of this piece, and you can see I have marked in a different color over the line that is black underneath. I have marked it in orange with a dotted line, and when I pull that off, I will make that a solid line. Now, to trim this excess off, there's 2 ways to do it. You can either make the dotted line around the edge and then trim it, or you can just take the scissors and trim it right even with the cushion. And that's what I'm going to do because I found that that is a lot easier than doing twice the work. Okay, I've trimmed the edges, and now I'm going to pull this off and go on to make trim. I'm going to trim the inner edge on these 2 wings, and I'm going to set those aside, and then I'm going to do all the other edges of the cushion before we start working on putting on the fabric and cutting it out. I have trimmed all the way around 3 sides. You can see on the top, I have marked where I want my seam to be, and I've overlapped these 2 pieces, and I've marked where the seam is going to be on each one. I've marked the center right here, and I've marked the other seam, and this is before being trimmed. You can see I've trimmed the bottom, and now I'm going to trim the top of this last piece. And then before I take all this off, I'm going to figure out how far I want the top piece here to overlap the zipper. This is the bottom end of the cushion, and this is where the zipper is going to go. I've marked the top and bottom piece so I don't get confused. I've marked the center line of the zipper, and as we come around, I will mark this corner piece just on the zipper and on the thing. And on this end, I've marked the end of the zipper and most likely where my fabric is going to be, and I will check that after I mount it to the fabric. We use a seat heater on our cushions, and the plug for the seat heater will be coming out right here. So I need to leave room for that, and then the other fabric will come over and cover this up nicely. I've laid out the durascrim on top of the back of the cushion, and I'm going to cut around the edge so I have a pattern for the back of the cushion that I can cut my fabric. Not certain if you can see it, but I've made my big plus for the diamond creation, and then on the x-axis I've done 3/4 around both sides of the diamond and 1.5 measures from that point on, and then on the vertical axis I've done 1.5 around the diamond on the both sides, and then 3 inches along the vertical axis. Okay, I've got my grid totally marked now, and so I've cut a piece of scrim, sewfoam, and this is the scrim side. So this is going to go down. This is the foam side, and this piece is going to go on top of it. Now, you can do it however you want, but I happen to have some temporary foam right here, 505 spray and fix. So I'm going to use that on this side of this and on the bottom side of the material, and I'm going to temporarily fuse them together while I sew, so nothing moves out of place. I have my 2 pieces of fabric fused together, my sewfoam and my fabric, and I have my machine set on 4, and I'm going to do a test thing to make sure that everything is working, and I have put in a full bobbin because I know it uses a lot of bobbin thread. So I'm going to start sewing, and one of the things I've noticed when people do diamonds is you don't backstitch at the beginning and the end, and that makes everything look real clean, and when we do our seams, that is going to catch those threads and lock them in place. So that's a little trick I watched from seeing other people doing diamonds, and I'm going to try it here. Since my material is faux leather, very similar to ultra leather, I'm using their recommended size 16 needle, Tex 70 thread, and the thread is nylon. Vic told me for this how-to video I couldn't just say I went to the sewing machine and here's the result, that I had to at least show you some of the sewing. So here we are. I'm sewing the diamonds on the front cover of the cushion, and you can see I started in the center and I'm going in this direction, then I'm going to do the next row. And to do that, basically I just line this up with the foot, put the presser foot down, and very slowly follow the line. As you can see, I've worked my way from the center off to the right, and now I'm going to work this way, going the same direction, and do the rest of these lines going this way. I have finished all of the diagonal lines going from left to right, and now I'm going to change my bobbin and start working on the center and going the other direction. I have finished the sewing. I left the center line marks, vertical and horizontal. so I can line up the pattern piece on the front and trim off for the side 3/8 inch that's going to attach to the other wings. You can see I've lined up the center lines and I'm holding it down with masking tape in strategic locations, and I've trimmed on the right side the 3/8 inch. I am not trimming along the bottom or the top until we get the pieces sewn together, and I will finish trimming the other side. And I'm just eyeballing it because if you've been sewing a while, you kind of know the difference between 3/8 and 1/4 and a 1/2 inch. Okay, I've laid out my two side pieces with the sew foam on the back. It is just laying on the top. I cut my 3/8 inch seam allowance here and left extra material on the sides that I'll trim off in a bit. I have my 3 pieces ready to sew together for the front cover. Before I actually sew these together at the seam, I am going to sew this edge here, this edge here, this edge here, and this edge here. Basically, where the seams are going to be, I'm going to sew the cushioning area right along the edge, and that will make the 3/8 inch seams sit down better. When I say sew along the edge, this is what I mean. I just, you can see my foot is right lined up with the edge, and I'm just gonna sew with my 4 stitch and just go along the edge. And I'm doing it along the edge wherever a seam is going to be. And here's what it looks like. It doesn't have to be precise because it's just to keep the layers together flat. Here I have a 5-inch magnetic sewing guide that I am going to put on top of the 3/8 inch mark. There's a 1/4 inch and a 1/2 inch, so I'm going to make it 3/8 inch, and I'm going to put it in place. Normally I wouldn't use a sewing guide, but with this thick material I have found that it comes in handy, especially when you get down to this section. It kind of forces you to pay attention and make sure that your pieces are together and that the sewing is going well. So I'm going to put that in place, and then I'm going to start sewing. I should have mentioned I'm holding this together with my sew clips. I'm not using seam tape or anything, and I'm going to put it in place and start sewing. I was back stitching where the curved part it comes in. I'm keeping the 2 layers together up against the seam guide. Removing the clips as I go along. And I'm going to go down here to the pivot point. that's it. I'm sewing down the seam underneath, just close to the edge here, so that there won't be all that bulk underneath, and it adds a little decorative touch to the piece. I'm using my right hand to make certain that that seam doesn't fold back in. Okay. You can see I have sewn that little decorative edge on both sides of the center panel. And I'm going to flip it over, and you can see the seams are now locked down, so they don't need trimming anymore. All the thread has been trimmed off, but I didn't actually have to trim any of the material or the foam or anything. As I mentioned, this is the back side of the cover, the top of the cover, and I have the lines for the side pieces that were approximately what the pattern made. I didn't make it a real accurate tracing because I knew I was going to do it different when I got to this point. So what I'm going to do, that's in black. What I did here was measure between these two things, and it was a little bit more than 8 in some spots, so I redid a center line on the back side here, and then I took my all the way down, and then I took my cushion and I put it on the center line, and I traced around it with red, and I verified that the two side wings are the same distance. They're a little bit smaller because this is a little bit bigger, and it's just the way the seam came out and everything, and I have quite a bit of excess on the bottom, but having too much is better than not having enough. I saw a cushion maker, and basically what he said was that they make the cushion a 1/4 inch bigger than the fabric. And all of a sudden a light bulb went off in my head, and I thought, no wonder I can never figure out how. I always just trace the cushion and use that as a seam line. So since it wants to be a 1/4 inch in from the edge here, what I'm going to do is add 1/8 of an inch seam allowance here all the way around, and then the seam will be 3/8 inch, and it'll be a 1/4 inch in from the line. So I've done it before on the first cushion. This is the second one, and it actually came out the best of all the cushions I've made in all the years, so I'm going to go ahead and do that again. So it's going to be 1/8 of an inch around on the outside of the line, and then we'll sew it 3/8 of an inch in from that. After I trim this piece, I will sew along the edge as we did on the individual pieces where we put the seams together before. Okay, I'm going to start working on my zippers. Okay, I have 2 pieces of fabric here. I've got the back side up. I've marked it in the center. And the top piece is actually the bottom piece of the zipper, and it's 2.5 inches high by 30 inches wide, and the bottom one is 4.5 inches high by 30 inches wide. And the top one, you can see I have my seam tape on there. I'm going to peel the white off, and the top one is going down 1/2 inch, and the bottom one is going down 1.5 inches. So I'm going to peel the white and show you what happens after that. You can see I have them held down with my seam tape and sew clips. Okay, I've used my seam tape, and I've attached to the top piece the part of the zipper that has the tab on it, and it is upside down. And now I have the seam tape on this piece, which is the bottom half, and I'm going to put that on there, and then I'll show you how that looks when that's on there, and then it's ready to sew. This is what it looks like on the back side. Now what I need to do is adjust it a little bit better on the front side so that the amount sticking up is even all the way across. So that's what I'm going to do now, and I've got the sticky stuff underneath, so it should be relatively easy to do. Let me tell you about the zipper. You can see I've been taking the zipper apart. The only reason I can do that is that this is a separating zipper. I use 27-inch ones. I get them at wawak.com, online, wawak.com, and I used to be able to go to Joann and just get them in store, but they no longer are in business, I don't believe, so wawak.com is where I get them. Once I have my zippers aligned and ready to sew, I make certain that I zip them together, that none of the seam tape or anything is interfering with the zipper itself. So you can see this is the back side of the zipper. The zipper is facing up to the good side of the fabric, which is what you want. And this is the top side, and this is the top piece, bottom piece, and the top piece will cover the bottom piece when it's finished. I have my zipper lined up with the zipper foot. I'm aiming for the edge of the zipper fabric right in here, and that way I should have a straight path. And when I get to the zipper tab, I will put leave the needle in, put the presser foot up, and move the tab to the other side. There goes the center line. Here's what the pieces look like. They've sewn on and they're finished. And I'm going to zip them together and show you what that looks like. So we have a hidden zipper. Again, I have my top piece. The pattern is cut and I've laid it out and I've traced it. Again, I'm going to do an 1/8 inch outside the line on the top, and on the bottom I'm going to give myself an inch or so just in case in the future when I get the top sewn on, then we'll put everything together and see how it fits in the back. Now I have my 2 side patterns traced, and I'm going to cut 1/8 of an inch more on this top side because that's what's going to match up to the big pattern piece we made with the diamonds, and we're going to do a 3/8 inch seam. And the same with this on the top side. The inside here, I'm just going to cut kind of straight between these so I have extra material. When we get the top sewn on, then we'll fit it on the cushion and make sure that we don't need that extra bit of material. before I trim it off. So I'm going to cut them now. I have my 3 edge pieces. Here's the center piece, and the right side over here, the left side over there. You can see the top lines line up and the bottom lines line up. And I'm going to sew this seam right here on these 2 pieces, and I'm using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. You can see on the Oregon Aero cover that both top corners have a reinforcement over the seam. So what I'm going to do is fold back the 2 edges of the seam, and I'm going to use my 1/4 inch seam tape to hold them down, and then I'm going to sew a piece of gross grain on the top, similar to what this looks like. Here is the finished seam with the 3/8 inch stitching on each side, both sides. The top looks real good. The inside with the gross grain doesn't look as good. I didn't center it as well, but the seam, when we sew it to the other pieces, will hold it in place. I have my zipper piece trimmed at the top about an eighth inch away from the pattern edge, and I have my front piece for the cushion trimmed an eighth of an inch from the edge. So I'm going to go over to the sewing machine now, and I'm going to sew the bottom zipper piece on, and then the 3 pieces that I sewed together before that will go after that because they overlap the zipper piece. I've put my walking foot back on the machine. I have put my fence guide here at 3/8 inches, and I'm going to start sewing, and I always start in the center, either on the top or the bottom when I'm putting those pieces on, and sew around one side, and then I flip it over and sew the other side, and for me that just works better. I now have a walking machine, and maybe I don't need to do that, but that's the way I've always done it, so I'm going to continue to do it that way. This is where that fence comes in handy, because it forces me to see exactly where the seam is going to be, and it makes the curve come out nicer. Okay, you can see I've flipped the piece over, and I'm working on the other corner. Okay, hello, I'm getting ready to sew the top edge piece on the front of the cover, and I have it centered on the top, and I have it, my fence is still at 3/8 inches, and I'm going to just sew this on, and I'm going to overlap it on this one, and I'm going to get going. I'm going to stop here and lock it. I realize that this piece has to go on the inside of this instead of the outside, so I'm going to have to work on that, but I'm going to sew the other side right now. So I've flipped the fabric over, and I'm now starting on the other side. Okay, this is my error. I forgot. I don't do real well on 3D visualization. This piece needs to come under this because it's overlapping it on the inside, on the outside actually. So what I'm going to do is take out about to here on the stitches on both sides, and then I'll resew it. Okay, I've pulled out the stitches that where the fabric needs to go underneath, and I've sewn a little edge on this, but only part way in because I'm not certain if this is, when I match it with the bottom piece of the cushion, I'm not certain if this is going to be square there or if it's going to need to go a little bit different shape. So I'm going to put this down. I've measured from the corner, and it was 6.5 inches, and I've marked that spot with my leather marker, and I'm going to tuck that in, pull the other piece on top, put my little clamp on, and then I'm going to sew this side, and I've got the other side set up exactly the same way. So this is where I had pulled out the stitches and put the piece on the right side, and it looks fine. When I put the bottom piece on, then I'll figure out if this needs to go like this or like that, and just sew the rest of that down. Okay, so I made sure the cushion is within the boundary of the front piece of fabric all the way around, and then I kind of push down and draw a line. You can see the new line is the top one most of the way around. It's not that much of a difference, but I think it will work well. But I did that all the way around, just push down on this and pull up on the side and then mark it. I sewed a little bit in around the edge of the cushion, the top of the cushion on the side, so that it would hold down that 3/8" inner seam on the inside and add a little decorative touch.
The Oregon Aero seat cover had Velcro on the back. If you are interested in doing that, now is the time to attach it to that back piece before that piece is attached to the other sides.
Okay, I'm on the home stretch. I figured out where this was going to end up, this piece that overlaps the end of the zipper. So I sewed it here and I sewed it on the other side. And I have pinned everything, and I'm going to sew the back. So it's crunch time. Hopefully everything turns out. Looks good so far. We put seat heaters on our seats, and I have attached it, and I'm doing it before I put the cushion into the seat cover, because this should be done and I won't have to take it out again. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll show you what the final cover looks like. Here is the finished cover. I am very pleased with it. Here is the side with the overlap and the zipper, and the other side with the seat heater cord, and the back, and the top with the seams.
The goal of this video was to give everyone who is interested in doing their own seat covers an idea of the process. It is labor intensive, but it is very rewarding, and it makes you feel good when you can say you did it yourself.